Well, to talk more about this, I'm joined by Aaron Zellen, who's a senior fellow at the Washington Institute. Thank you very much for being with us on France 24. We can understand then that the situation in Syria is moving very rapidly on the ground. Do you have any information as to what it's like, the clashes there, people being displaced in these previously Kurdish-held regions?
Yeah, I mean, we still see some level of fighting, but it's definitely not as much as we saw in prior days, if not last week. Part of this is based off of the agreement between Trump and Shara about the Syrian security forces not going into Kurdish majority areas. And so the front lines have kind of frozen in the last day or two. The larger issue is more how the Syrian government now secures prisons that had previously been run by the SDF, especially the ones with the ISIS members in them.
And those prisoners that we were mentioning that are going to be transferred to Iraq, the US says that there'll be 7,000. What more can you tell us about this? I mean, there's been particular clashes around the prisons over the last few days that had previously been run by the Kurdish forces there. What's the significance of these prisoners and the prisons?
Yeah, I mean, these are the worst of the worst. These are the people that were fighting for the Islamic State when they're controlling territory and raising chaos and terror against the civilian populations in Iraq and Syria last decade, as well as all the plots that we saw in attacks in Western countries a decade ago. And that's why the U.S. wants to secure them to make sure that there isn't a chance of them being broken out of prison. We saw 4 years ago that the Islamic State attempted to break them out of one of the detention facilities. And a number of people got out, and the U.S. does not want that to happen again. And so they're being moved to Iraq. However, it should be noted that there's approximately 9,000 to 10,000 male detainees. And so it's interesting that they're only bringing over 7,000, which suggests that some of the individuals will remain in Syrian custody.
Well, let's talk about the US role in all of this, because the Kurds say that they feel abandoned by Washington. I mean, the Kurds were the US's main ally against the fight against Islamic State group in Syria years ago. And now US officials are saying that the nature of their partnership has changed.
I mean, I think it's a bit more complicated than saying that the U.S. abandoned Kurds. For one, the U.S. relationship was with the Syrian Democratic Forces. While it is true that the leadership of the SDF were Kurdish, 2/3 of the people in the SDF were actually Arabs. And the Arabs have flipped sides and have joined the Syrian government. And so I think that narrative is a bit not serious in terms of the fact that the U.S. is also making sure that the Syrian government doesn't now go into the majority Kurdish areas to make sure that we don't see a repeat of what happened in the coast and Sweden related to the Alawites and Druze and not to the Kurds. Whether the Syrian government can control the tribes is another question, but the U.S. has been working to make sure that nothing along those lines is happening.
In any case, Washington is working very closely with the new government in Syria. Do you think this is a sort of win for Ahmed al-Sharaa? I mean, his forces ousted Bashar al-Assad in December 2024. As a former al-Qaeda affiliate commander, he was under pressure to unite the fractured country. Can we interpret this as a win for him?
Yeah, it's extraordinary. He called for people in the East to have patience for him, and that eventually he would return these territories to the Syrian government control. The question now going forward has to prove that he can run the country not only amongst Sunni Arabs, but also making sure minorities are included, as well as proving that he can rebuild the country. There's a lot of questions going forward. President Trump lifted the sanctions to give the new government a chance. And now all of it will be on him. There will be no more excuses.
And what role has Turkey played in all of this? I mean, Ankara has long pressed the Syrian Democratic Forces, which it sees as a terrorist organization, to follow through on last year's agreement for its forces to integrate into the Syrian army.
It's definitely been pushing diplomatically for the SDF to join the Syrian military, as well as for its civilian autonomous administration to join the civilian administration of the new Syrian state. They've also, I believe, provided intelligence to the Syrian military on these operations that have been going on over the last few weeks as well. And so one of the biggest questions going forward will be Turkish influence inside of Syria as this situation has changed, which could create more tensions now between Syria and Israel too, since Israel worries about the growing strength of Turkey in the region.
Does Israel have any role to play here? I mean, we heard reports of talks in other countries, notably in Paris. Are they not pushing for the SDF to integrate? Are they not pushing for the Syrian government to go ahead with its advance and take over back these territories?
There are reports that during the meetings in Paris a couple of weeks ago now that the Syrian government asked both the U.S. and Israel whether it was okay to conduct an operation to take over the Arab majority lands in the east, and they kind of got the nod to do so. And so that suggests that Israel is no longer pushing in the same way that they might have done last year, where it seemed that they suggested that they would, work on behalf of the Kurds as well as what they've said previously about the Druze in the south. The question, though, is whether they would have the capacity to do that, since it's not near their border, like where the Druze are in the south, as well as the fact that there's the possibility that could have led to a proxy war with Turkey if they were overtly involved then.
And what does that mean for the Syria-Israel relationship going forward?
I think many viewed the meeting in Paris as positive, but the question is now that Shara is even stronger and has even greater upper hand within Syria, whether this will once again create, questions in Israel, whether they want to actually play ball on any kind of deal, because they still worry about their own security near their border. And with a stronger Syria, they might feel more pressure now from the Syrian side.
Well, walk us through some of the challenges that Shara now faces, I mean, both domestic and international.
Domestically, he has to prove that he can expand his coalition beyond just the majority of the population to provide truly for minorities alongside the majority. There are also questions of them being able to have the capacity to bring in money to do the reconstruction and rebuilding without there being any corruption. Plus, there's worries amongst civil society that they are losing space and freedoms in the last year or so. And so there will be a lot more focus on their domestic agenda now compared to, say, last year, when a lot of focus was on the international agenda and trying to bring Syria back into the international fold and getting the sanctions off of them.
And in these last few days, as the Syrian government forces did make that lightning advance across this territory in the north and northeast, government forces overtook a number of oil fields, notably water dams. How significant is this?
Yeah, it's huge, because now the Syrian state has control of pretty much all of the different energy resources, and that will make it much easier to try and sell to different international businesses or countries that have sovereign wealth funds to invest in them and repair them, if not build all new types of terminals or dams, since much of these facilities were either damaged or destroyed during the war, if not just they weren't kept up because of the way the Assad regime ruled, since everything is very much out of date.
And just going back to the Kurds, I mean, what's next for them? Do we imagine that this ceasefire, this 4-day truce period can be different, and that by the end of the week they will come up with a plan to integrate into the central government administration?
I worry that there will be a return to fighting. I hope there isn't. But based off of the precedent we've seen over the last few weeks, it doesn't seem like either side wants to give up. And then the worry is that the thing that most people worry about is that there will be a massacre against Kurds in the same way we saw against the Alawites and the Druze in the past, which hopefully is avoided, of course.
Do you think that the Kurds in Iraq have are going to come into play here, to come to the Kurds in Syria's defense?
I don't think on a sort of government level, but there's already a lot of reports of individuals in their own capacities going across the border to try and join up with the remnants of the SDF to fight off any onslaught from the Syrian government.
All right, Aaron Zellin, a senior fellow at the Washington Institute. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your analysis.